Oaken planks creaked as ghostly shapes moved across the deck of the ship in the morning mist engulfing Mimir, solidifying into human form only as they drew close. No one knew in which direction the Nar was heading. Gudrid couldn't sleep following the storm the night before that had threatened to end their voyage. She stayed awake through the night and saw the starry sky changing into the quiet whiteness now surrounding them. It was as dangerous as the darkness of the night, with one exception. The fog cloaked the white ice, making the bergs nearly impossible to see until they were right on top of them. Gudrid swore that there were apparitions concealed in the mist. Swirling wisps of water vapor formed shapes that quickly reformed into other shapes, or disappeared altogether. She jumped when she thought she saw the ethereal outline of another Nar alongside of them. It appeared and disappeared, then appeared again, looking as if it would collide with them, and she clutched Thorfinn's arm tighter and pointed in the direction of the ship. But when Thorfinn looked, it had vanished and didn't reappear again. Thorfinn told her that it was the sun shining through breaks in the fog and reflecting the Mimir off the vapor at strange and random angles, almost like a reflection in the facets of a crystal, he said. But Gudrid was convinced that they were the ghost ships of previous doomed voyages. She'd made it her personal assignment to keep a lookout for the floating ice through the night. While Thorfinn was incapacitated, it was her duty to protect the crew. She willingly took on this job, knowing that the crew would listen to her just as they would Thorfinn, well aware that she was every bit as capable of commanding the ship as he was. She walked to the bow of the ship where Othere and Arn also kept a lookout from the prow, and watched the ocean ahead of them. They nodded to her, but otherwise kept vigilant eyes on the ocean, watching for floating ice and praying to the gods that there was no subsurface ice large enough to do damage. The larger islands of ice weren't as dangerous because they could be seen from far enough away to be avoided, but the ones that bobbed below the surface were virtually invisible unless Othere and Arn looked straight at them. Just as dangerous was a rolling cliff of ice falling upon them. A block of ice toppling from that height would instantly splinter the ship no matter where it hit. In minutes the crew would succumb to the icy water. Even if they did make it to the mountain of floating ice, they'd still die from exposure to the cold North Atlantic wind. Icy apparitions floated through the mist with them, their wakes the only evidence of their presence. The haunting squeal of a porpoise and the eerie moans of whales filled the hollow air with sounds that provoked the mind into thinking about the supernatural. In the distance of the white night, a gray image slowly solidified from the swirling mist. It seemed to duck in and out of the whiteness, not a part of the wall of fog, but not separate from it either. Othere nudged Arn, unsure if he was looking at an iceberg or an illusion. Gudrid saw Arn nod, and Othere bellowed to the rowers, "Hold water!" They immediately stopped rowing and let the oars drag across the surface of the water, slowing down the Nar. Gudrid could clearly see the mountain of ice now. Its right slope dropped down beneath the water, then leveled out below the surface to a ghostly blue plateau. Its left side presented only a wall of ice. A large growler floated by the ship. Gudrid jumped back and grabbed Othere's tunic. She felt his body tense as if her touch transmitted her fear to him. A large eye stared back at them, frozen in the floating ice. "By all that is in hell, what is that?" Gudrid yelled. As the ice floated by, the disjointed pieces she'd glimpsed began to form into a whole. "Ark, it's just a frozen whale," Othere grunted. The separate sections of the whale became one whole animal in Gudrid's eyes. Its lifeless body had frozen in an unnatural position, victim to the ocean currents. Finally, the tail floated by, its outer fin chewed, barnacles growing on its fatty tissue. Othere chuckled. "For a moment, I too thought it was hell herself coming from the depths to take us." "Turn!" Gudrid screamed. Othere looked at Gudrid, then instinctively followed her stare. The twisting mist had solidified into a large wall of ice that was being dragged by the current in the water before the prow. Harold heaved the steerboard using his body weight to try pulling it beyond its capacity, but Gudrid knew that his efforts were in vain. The Mimir could not clear the floating ice in time. The amount of damage that the impact would do to the Nar depended on the speed of the boat and where on the floating ice the Nar impacted. The The Mimir was turning, so the impact would be on port side. The dragging oars might help to slow them down, Gudrid thought, but not in enough time to completely miss the ice. "We're going to hit," Arn yelled. Gudrid could have sworn she heard the Valkyrie screeching overhead, but it was the sound and the vibration of the Mimir's curved prow, grounding on the subsurface ice as the keel scraped across the top of a submerged plateau. She grabbed Arn with one hand and held tightly onto the side of the ship with her other, just in time. As the curved prow pried into the ice, crew toppled over like sticks in a heavy windstorm. Some were rendered unconscious, while others slammed against other crewmen, knocking them into the frigid water. Loud thuds and rumblings rose from the hold as the cargo shifted, hitting the side of the hull. The oxen and sheep below deck wailed loudly. The sound of rolling grain barrels ended in an explosive crash at the bow. The Mimir finally stopped with one final ear-piercing crunch. Her front keel surfaced and grounded on the ice, leaving the Mimir beached precariously on the floating white island. With its ballast no longer in the water, the ship tipped to starboard. If not for the central crag of ice jutting up from below the surface, the Mimir would have tipped over and sank. As it happened, the mast and the port hull dug into the hard snow and ice. Thorfinn appeared through the hatch. He looked like he had regained some of his strength, but he hadn't fully recovered. His steps were a little unbalanced and blood matted his hair to the side of his skull. He looked around the deck and saw Gudrid standing at the bow with Othere and Arn. The crew were slowly dragging themselves off the deck in shivering and painfully disjointed movements. The cold made their movements all the slower. Othere lay on his back, blood trickling from a long gash in his head. Gudrid knelt and cradled his head, trying to stop the bleeding with the hem of her dress. Thorfinn came over, saw her efforts, and grabbed his cuff, ripping it off his sleeve. He quickly tied the thick cloth around Othere's forehead. With the help of Arn, he helped Othere to his feet. Thorfinn turned to her. "Are you all right, Gudrid?" She nodded, wringing out her dress. "What happened?" Thorfinn yelled, looking around angrily. Gudrid did not know what made him angry, the fear of lost lives or that their journey had almost ended before they reached Vinland. "Rand's feast of fish will have to wait for us," Gudrid thought, also looking around. "The ice came upon us without warning," Arn said, wincing in pain. "There was not enough time to turn the ship." "We are truly fortunate that we're still breathing air," Gudrid said as she looked over the prow of the ship. The impact on the ice had split the oaken keel. The hull appeared to be still intact, but the full weight of Mimir's hull rested against the mountain of ice. The oak mast had cracked when it hit the ice. "Tostig, come up here," Thorfinn yelled. In minutes, Gudrid saw Tostig moving through the confusion of men picking themselves up off the deck and frantically looking around for missing mates. His stubby legs moved with great effort, first lifting the opposite side of his body and then propelling it forward to an awkward, tottering gait. He occasionally lost the rhythm of the step and stumbled, but his disproportionately large arms flailed in circles, keeping him upright. "Yes, Thorfinn. Assess the damage to the Mimir and search the hold for materials to repair her." "The ice is taking us off course," Gudrid said, feeling the ship drifting on her port side. Thorfinn could only shrug. They were helpless to stop it. He leaned over the prow. Further examination revealed that the impact had actually split the ice, and a third of the keel was now trapped inside. Tostig reported that the pine tar sealing the wood had eroded away during the stresses of the voyage, and water continually splashed into the crevice and froze, further trapping the prow in the ice mass. If they didn't free themselves quickly, they'd freeze irrevocably to the floating island. The Mimir could not afford to spend any more time at sea. The autumn storms would start soon. With the change in season, sea storms were much more frequent, and there was less daylight. Their voyage would take longer and be more dangerous, and there was always the real risk of the world's serpent taking them farther and farther off course. "Warrior captain, assemble your men on the ice floe with swords and axes," Thorfinn yelled to the mass of crew assembling on the deck. "Warriors, arm yourselves," the captain barked to his men. "We fight the sea and the serpent." Freydis Eriksdottir was the first to head the ship's prow. Being the only daughter of Eric the Red, she knew more than most the image that she needed to maintain. Eric's family were strong and powerful leaders and warriors. Freydis, we have no need for an archer at this battle, the captain told her. That is why I have brought my sword, she answered, brandishing a double-edged blade. I am fully skilled in hand-to-hand fighting. Arg! The captain yelled his battle cry, displaying the few crooked and blackened teeth still left in his mouth. Freydis led the other warriors in a stampede to the front of the ship, looking as fierce as if they were about to engage an enemy, their axes and blades raised high in the air. 20 warriors in all vaulted over the prow of the ship and landed on the ice. Some hacked at the ice with their axes and swords. The others simultaneously rocked the 12-ton Mimir. Gudrid thought she felt the Mimir move, perhaps only a little, but it moved nonetheless. Keep going, warriors, the captain yelled. I think we're winning this battle. Gudrid said a silent prayer to Thor to aid in their escape. She knew that Thor's power was limited, but perhaps he could be their advocate. She hoped that her plea would be well received, but as with all gods, it was difficult to enter their minds and know what they wanted humans to do. Warriors, fight harder, the captain growled. Time is our enemy. With renewed conviction and purpose, those wielding their weapons hacked at the ice harder and harder, while the others threw their body weight against the Nar, first pushing, then heaving the hull back and forth on its keel. Suddenly, there was a long creak and then a thunderous crack. We've broken free, the captain hollered. Get aboard! The victorious warriors jumped back into the Mimir, landing on top of one another in their haste not to be trapped on the ice. Those already on deck helped others up, or pulled them aside, tossing them onto the deck as fishermen would do with a jigger full of fish. The last of the men and the women Gudvid were pulled and dragged over the side of the ship as the wool sail caught the breath of the gods, and the Mimir floated away from her icy shackle. Thorfinn congratulated the warriors as they piled aboard. He looked at Gudrid, his face a mask of relief and joy. Thank Thor for our deliverance. I will make a tribute to him as soon as opportunity allows. Tostig returned from below deck and fiddled with his bearing dial. With a few quick mental calculations, he determined that they were not too far off course, but the oarsmen would have to row like a school of porpoises to get back to their previous heading. Once the fog cleared, he could take much more accurate readings, but for now, he said he was satisfied with his intuition. Once he got them back into the Usuder wind currents, they could all relax a little. Port oarsmen, give way, the dwarf shouted. Starboard oarsmen, hold water. As soon as the orders were out of his mouth, the Mimir turned. Starboard oarsmen, give way. Both sides of the boat exploded into activity as the pairs of men at the oars heaved their muscular bodies, fighting the swells in the cold Atlantic wind. You're doing a king's job, Tostig shouted, trying to keep their spirits high. We're in debt to you for your brave and valiant job. Tostig, what is our condition? Thorfinn asked. Gudrid read trouble on the dwarf's face. Tostig dropped his voice. Our hull is split in 3 places. Water is leaking into the hold. I've put 2 oarsmen down there to try to keep it under control with orders to keep our situation a secret. Can it be repaired? Gudrid asked, hoping that Tostig's answer would fix all the problems that her mind was creating. Tostig's expression was grim. On dry land, but not at sea. The Mimir is sinking.